Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We here are lifelong Catholics, and what we do here is all for free in the love of Jesus Christ and the Most Holy Trinity and His Holy Church. It will defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Our work is a true sense of apostolate. Any funds raised goes back into this work for equipment. This helps us to give you an unbiased, hard-hitting truth that is not controlled by political correctness or interest groups. And today we're going to be continuing the book. Let's see here. Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. And this time we are going to take on General Electric. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure. And being as part of this new media apostolate for the English-speaking world, Uncontrolled Media. And these fascinating series of shows we're doing exposing how the Masonic banks of New York City, in particular Skull and Bones, have so completely controlled the United States and world history in the last century and are guilty of hundreds of millions of deaths. And we're focusing in on how they did this through U.S. corporations and German corporations. Our last program was on IG Farben, the chemical company that was financed by Rockefeller's banks in New York. And we previously talked about how Hitler's, through Thyssen, Iron Steel Corporation, was financed by Brown Brothers Harriman. Now we're going to talk about a classic of American consumer products and industry, General Electric. And you thought they were such good people. And this is the history you will never taught in high school, and you'll never be taught in high school until the Christian Party of America wins Congress, because if you knew it, you would never vote Democrat or Republican again. These parties are just so dirty. I mean, dirt is their essence. It's not just dirty. They were once white. No. Okay, so General Electric. Where does this story begin? And
it begins by the President Herbert Hoover in his memoirs on page 420 that Anthony Sutton quotes from. Among early Roosevelt fascist measures was the National Industry Recovery Act of June 16, 1933. The origins of this scheme are worth repeating. These ideas were first suggested by Gerard Swope of General Electric Company. Following this, they were adopted by the United States Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, so here we have an indisputable authority here, Herbert Hoover, naming names. Okay, so against facts, there is no argument. Mm-hmm. Let's now trace how General Electric was involved. Why is General Electric suggesting to Roosevelt a Soviet kind of idea on how to rebuild the American economy?
Mm-hmm. The multinational giant General Electric has an unparalleled role in the 20th century history. The General Electric Company electrified the Soviet Union in the 1920s and 1930s and fulfilled the Soviet Lenin's dictum that socialism equals electrification. The Swope plan, created by General Electric's one-time president, Gerard Swope, became Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal by a process deployed by one-time President Herbert Hoover and described in Wall Street and FDR. There was a long-lasting, intimate relationship between Swope and the young of General Electric Company and the Roosevelt family. There was between General Electric and the Soviet Union. In 1936, Senator James A. Reed of Missouri, an early Roosevelt supporter, became aware of Roosevelt's betrayal of liberal ideas and attacked Roosevelt's New Deal program as a tyrannical measure leading to despotism, and sought by its sponsors under the communistic cry of social justice. Senator Reed further charged on the floor of the Senate that Franklin D. Roosevelt's was a hired man for the economic royalists in Wall Street, and that the Roosevelt family is one of the largest stockholders in the General Electric Company.
So precisely now, how does this conspiracy of
Mm,
GE to help the Soviet Union and to help Nazi Germany, how does it unpack? What year does it actually begin?
let's see here. Okay. Looks like Walter Rathenow was, until his assassination in 1922, managing director of a Legion Rechtsstaat Gesellschaft, or AEG, or German General Electric, like Owen Young and Gerald Schwab, his counterparts in the U.S. He was the prominent advocate of corporate socialism. Walter Rathenow spoke out publicly against competition and free enterprise. Why? Because Rathenow and Swope wanted the protection and cooperation of the state for their own corporate objectives and profit, but not, of course, for anybody else's objectives and profits. Rathenow expressed their plea in the new political economy. The new economy will, as we have seen, be no state or governmental economy, but a private economy committed to a civic power of resolution, which certainly will require state cooperation for organic consolidation to overcome inner friction and increase production and endurance.
So um, Sutton puts his finger on some really important terms here. Social justice is a Marxist term, first point. So if you hear social justice being preached in your church, you notice they're not preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, they're preaching the Das Kapital of Karl Marx. And the other thing is the it's perfect. It might shock us that American companies are supposed to be free market organizations are doing deals with dictatorships or actually sponsoring the creation of dictatorships. But when we look at it from a point of view of Sutton is there's nothing better that a capitalist wants but is a complete monopoly.
Mhm.
And you can get a complete monopoly most easily under dictatorship. And this is why American companies overseas have a long history of supporting dictatorships to the shame of our country because there's no oversight in what they do. And this is one thing a Christian party would look at very carefully. So,
Mhm.
interfrictional thing, all the spiel about not having other electric companies is a bunch of baloney. And uh, gen- obviously, in electrical production, uh, monopoly is even more important for the bottom line because you need many consumers to buy all your production,
Mhm.
and and without competition, you can raise the prices to whatever you want and make as much profit as you want, as long as the government nods to it. So it's very tempting for in the electrical industry. So how does GE start collaborating in Nazi Germany?
When we disentangle the turgid revenue prose, this means that the power of the state was to be made available in private firms for their own corporate purposes, i.e., what is popularly known as National Socialism. Rathenau spoke out publicly against competition and free enterprise and inheritance, not their own wealth so far as it can be determined, but the wealth of others who lacked political pull in the state apparatus. Owen D. Young of General Electric was one of 3 U.S. delegates to the 1923 Dawes Plan, meeting which established the German reparations program. In a Dawes and Young plans, we can see how some private firms were able to benefit from the power of the state. The largest single loans from Wall Street to Germany during the 1920s were reparation loans. It was ultimately the U.S. investor who paid for German reparations. The cartelization of the German electrical industry under AEG, as well as the steel and chemical industries discussed in Chapter 1 and 2, was made possible with these Wall Street loans.
We not only bought Germany, we rebuilt Germany.
Hmm. So the first loan, January 26, 1925. It's all from the German General Electric Company, but managing bank in the U.S. National City Co. 10 million bucks. December 9th, 1925. Again, the German General Electric Company with the National City Co. U.S. Bank. $10 million. May 22nd, 1928. Same company. Same bank. $10 million. June 7th, 1928. Again, same company, same bank. $5 million.
That's a total of how much? How many millions?
1, 2, 3, 30, 35. So $35 million.
It sounds like they built the entire German electric company.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder the power system is so good in Germany. Americans built it. What do we had one such so good? So it didn't stop with loans, did it?
Mm-mm. Oh no. In 1928, at the Young Plan reparations meeting, we find General Electric President Owen D. Young in the chair as the chief U.S. delegate, appointed by the U.S. government to use U.S. government power and prestige to decide international financial matters and enhancing Wall Street and German electric profits. In 1930, Owen D. Young, after whom the Young Plan for German reparations was named, became chairman of the board of General Electric Company in New York City. Young was also chairman of the executive committee of Radio Corporation of America and director of both German General Electric and Osram in Germany. Young also served on the boards of other major U.S. corporations, including General Motors, ABC, RKO, and he was the counselor of the National Industrial Conference Board, a director of the International Chamber of Commerce, and deputy chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York City.
The Federal Reserve Bank in New York City. Now, wasn't that the bank that issued the letter saying we're totally behind the Bolshevik Revolution?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it's supposed to be a bank for reserving money for American banks. It seems to be very politically active.
Uh-huh.
And this guy sits on a bit too many boards to make him above suspicion, as you would say. So, okay, just to clarify what Sutton is telling us here. So, in the American system, the way the thing is supposed to work is government power is here and private industry is here. And everyone has every company has equal freedom to act, and the government favors no one. It sets the rules, it sets the laws, and everyone has equal liberty to act. Okay. Socialism is when the industries are the ownership of the industries is taken by the state, and they operate as state entities. Okay, and if they make profit, they make profit for the state. That's socialism. But National Socialism, the idea of that usually attributed to Hitler's party, is when the power of the state here favors one company over here and uses its authority to make sure that company has monopoly and can make all the profit it wants for itself, not for the state, for its investors. So you can see if you're a crooked company, what form of government would you like best of all?
Mm-hmm.
National Socialism. And this explains why the banks in New York supported Adolf Hitler. They already had in mind fascism. Okay, so fascism does not originate in Germany. It originates in the New York City banks discussion halls. That's where it comes from. And we already have extensively explained that the New York City banks are all Masonic. They're controlled by Freemasons, and especially the Lodge. So, the next time you want to point a finger at Germans and say you're fascists, well, I think you need to look twice, especially if you're an American, and turn that finger around some.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the problem is here. So the irony is that hundreds of thousands of Jews were exterminated, and millions, even Catholics. Okay, but the people who did it, who are really responsible, are in New York City, and they've never paid, and those institutions have never paid, and they're the ones that should be sued for reparations. So they had interlocking corporate boards by sharing members and across national boundaries, and that was
Mm-hmm.
to guarantee control and that they get their money back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously, I think the American banks would have thought it was a good investment if the German government is going to back their companies with monopolies. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
one way the Germans attracted the investment.
Oh yeah. You ready to go down south of the border?
Okay, let's go south of the border.
George Swope was president and director of General Electric Company, as well as the French and German associated companies, including the AEG, Austria, and Germany. Swope was also a director of RCA, NBC, and National City Bank of New York. Other directors of International German Electric at the time reflect Morgan control of the company. Both Young and Swope were generally known as the Morgan representatives on the GE board, which included Thomas Cochran, another partner in the J.P. Morgan firm. General Electric Director Clark Haynes Minor was president of the International General Electric in the 1920s. Another director was Victor M. Cutter of the First National Bank of Boston, and was a figure in the Banana Revolution in Central America.
So here and now we're talking about J.P. Morgan, one of the most corrupt families of New York City. They made their money by the first Morgan guy made his money by actually printing counterfeit shares in the New York Central Railway and selling them for a big profit, causing the company's value of its stock to plummet to nothing. And then he came in and bought it up for pennies on the dollar. And he was never tried for that crime. And that's the foundation of J.P. Morgan. I imagine that this goes much deeper than just building electric power plants in Germany. Did they actually collaborate in the rise of the Nazi Party?
Um, I think so. It's getting there. But in the late 1920s, Young, Swope, and Minor of International and General Electric moved into the German electrical industry and gained, if not control, as some have reported, then at least a substantial say in the internal affairs of both AEG and Austria. In July 1929, an agreement was reached between General Electric and three German firms, AEG, Siemens and Halsig, and Koppel and Company, which between them owned all shares in Austria, the electric bulb manufacturer. There's the electric bulb, folks. General Electric purchased 16% of Austrian stock and reached a joint agreement for international control of electric bulbs production and marketing. Clark Minor and Gerald Swope became directors of Austria. In July 1929, great interest was shown in rumors circulating in German financial circles that General Electric was also buying into AEG. That talks to this end were in progress between AEG and GE. In August, it was confirmed that 14 million marks of common AEG stock were to be issued to General Electric. These shares, added to shares bought on the open market, gave General Electric a 25% interest in the AEG. A closer working agreement was signed between the two companies, providing the German company U.S. technology and patents. It was emphasized in the news reports that AEG would not have participation in GE, but on the other hand, GE would finance expansion of AEG in Germany. The German financial press was also noted that there was no AEG representation on the board of GE in the United States, but that 5 Americans were now on the board of AEG. The Vasches Zetstone recorded, "The American electrical industry has conquered the world, and only a few of the remaining opposing bastions have been able to withstand onslaught."
So this is the state of affairs before the stock market crash in October of 1929, which we mentioned before was engineered by the Forbes family out of New York City and their close friends, and was one of the chief instruments for New York bankers to take over industry around the world for pennies on the dollar. And what is GE's participation in Germany right after the crash? When did they gain even more control?
So by 1930, unknown to German financial press, General Electric had similarly gained an effective technical monopoly over the Soviet electrical industry, and was soon to penetrate even remaining bastions of Germany, particularly the Siemens Group. In January 1930, 3 GE men were elected to the board of AEG: Clark H. Miner, George Swope, and E. H. Baldwin. The International General Electric continued its moves to merge the world electrical industry into a giant cartel under Wall Street control. In February, General Electric focused on the remaining German electrical giants, Siemens and Halsek, and while able to obtain a large block of debentures issued on behalf of the German firm by Dillon Read of New York, GE was not able to gain participation or directors on the Siemens board. While the German press recognized even this limited control as an historical economic event of the first order and an important step toward a future world electric trust, Siemens retained its independence from General Electric, and this independence is important for our story. The New York Times reported, "The entire press emphasizes the fact that Siemens, contrary to AEG, maintains its independence for the future, and points out that no General Electric representatives will sit on Siemens' board of directors." Now, there is no evidence that Siemens, either through Siemens and Halsek or Siemens and Schuckert, participated directly in the financing of Hitler. Siemens contributed to Hitler only slightly, and indirectly through a shared participation in Austrian. On the other hand, both AEG and Austrian directly financed Hitler through the National Treuhand in substantial ways. Siemens retained its independence in the early 1930s, while both AEG and Austrian were under American dominance, with American directors. There is no evidence that Siemens, without American directors, financed Hitler. On the other hand, we have irrefutable documentary evidence, see page 56, that both German General Electric, Austrian, both with American directors, financed Hitler. In the months following attempted Wall Street takeover of Siemens, the pattern of developing world trust in the electrical industry clarified. There was an end to international patent fights, and the GE interest in AEG increased to nearly 30%.
So this is pretty clear then that since the German companies are supporting Hitler, all financed by New York, the real cause behind the rise of Hitler is not Germany, and it's not German companies. It's New York City bankers.
Mhm.
It's a very good analysis that Sutton provides us.
Consequently, in the early 1930s, as Hitler prepared to grab dictatorial power in Germany, backed by some, but by no means all, German-American industrialists, the German General Electric was owned by International General Electric, about 30%. The Gesellschaft für Elektrische Unternehmungen, 25%, and Ludwig Loh, 25%. International General Electric also had an interest about 16 2/3% in Austria, an additional indirect influence in several different German companies. Um, yeah, and each of these companies linked to German General Electric through common electric reactors, Akkumulatorenfabrik, directors of the German General Electric, Quantenpfeifer, had direct finances to Hitler. Austrian, Memroth Perils, direct financed. Deutschland Babcock Wilcox, the director of the General Electric, Landau, there is not known if he had direct financing of Hitler. Während Isaac Stahlwerk, Tyson, Wolf Nathan Kurdorf Goldsmith, direct finance, and on it goes.
So those are the connections between the companies. What more does Sutton lay out for us in this collaboration between GE and Adolf Hitler?
The taproot of modern corporate socialism runs deep into the management of two affiliated multinational corporations. We have General Electric in the United States and its foreign associates, including German General Electric and Austrian and Germany. We have noted that Gerard Swope, the second president and chairman of General Electric, and Walter Rathenau of AEG promoted radical ideas for control of the state by private businesses' interests. From 1915 onwards, International General Electric, IGF, located at 120 Broadway in New York City, acted as the foreign investment manufacturing and selling organization for General Electric Company. International General Electric is on 120 Broadway Street in New York City.
Now, isn't that address sound familiar?
Yeah.
I mean, what is that 140 Broadway?
Brown Brothers Harriman.
So it's the right next block.
Yeah.
And we always said the Federal Reserve Bank of New York is diagonal from Brown Brothers Harriman. I think we can see a pattern here.
Mm-hmm. So IGE held interests in overseas manufacturing companies, including a 25 to 30% holding in German General Electric, plus holdings in Austrian. Okay, I'm not going to say the big name. Also in Berlin. These holdings gave International General Electric 4 directors on the board of AEG, another director at Osram, and significant influence in international domestic policies of these German companies. The significance of this General Electric ownership is that AEG and Austrian were prominent suppliers of funds for Hitler in his rise to power in Germany in 1933. A bank transfer slip dated March 2nd, 1933, from AEG to Delbruck Strickler & Co. in Berlin requests that 60,000 Reichsmark be deposited to the National Treuhand, National Trusteeship account for Hitler's use. The slip is reproduced on page 56 in this book, folks.
60,000 Reichsmarks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So remember what we said when we did our show I'm speaking to the listeners now, when we did our show on the Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a Masonic lodge which was founded by by Americans who joined a Masonic lodge in Berlin. So what we see going on with these New York banks is that they're German American contacts using the wealth of America to rebuild and refinance Germany and put into power a man of their choice. This is why the entire German political and industrial system bows to Hitler, it's not because Hitler was some divine person or was, the greatest, most sane man. He was their pick, their choice, their pawn, their front man of something that was decided in the lodge, even in Germany, in the lodge in Germany and the lodge in the United States. And that's why Hitler came to be. Hitler is the flowering of the Masonic Lodge. He is what the lodge wants. And um, Hitler was defeated. It was just considered too unacceptable in his own age, but it's coming back. Hitler said his party would return in 100 years, 2019, and it would come back as a religion. And we have now this COVID madness. We have this craziness of wearing the mask, dehumanizing everyone, enslaving anyone, wanting to inject everyone with vaccines. And it's the same mentality of absolute godless, maniacal control. And it's being promoted by New York banks
Mm-hmm.
and all the industries involved in them. So things haven't changed. The lodge is still in control and they want to destroy even more. And this is why we're doing these programs to help people understand how much it's necessary for us Christians to support Christian institutions and not participate in the Masonic system by constantly supporting these groups. So, does it get worse than that?
Mm-hmm. IG Farben was the most important of the domestic financial backers of Hitler, and as noted elsewhere, IG Farben controlled American IG. Moreover, several directors of AEG were also on the board of IG Farben, i.e., Hermann Bucher, chairman of the AEG, was on the IG Farben board. So were AEG directors Julius Fletchheim, Walter von Rath, and IG Farben contributed 30% of the 1933 Hitler National Trusteeship or Takeover Fund.
Takeover fund. Lovely.
Walter Fahrenhorst of AEG was also on the board of Phoenix AG, Thyssen AG, and Demag AG, and all were contributors to Hitler's fund. Demag AG contributed 50,000 Reichsmarks to Hitler's fund and had a director with AEG, the notorious Friedrich Flick, an early Hitler supporter who was later convicted at the Nuremberg trials. Accumulatoren Fabrik AG was a Hitler contributor of 25,000 Reichsmarks, with two directors on the AEG board, August Pfeiffer and Gunther Quandt. Quandt personally owned 75% of Accumulatoren Fabrik.
So this interlocking control in German companies shows you that the Rockefellers, Morgan Bank, and Brown Brothers Harriman, who appear to be acting independently in the U.S., but in Germany are actually supporting any companies that cooperate together. And this cooperation in Germany would never have come about if they were not already meeting in secret in the United States and collaborating together. So their unity in Germany is just showing what's going on in America that's not recorded in the private boardrooms of these banks. Because if they were competitors in the United States, they would never allow joint interlocking boards of directors in Germany. Would have never
Mm-hmm.
happened. This just reflects their agreement in the United States. And yet we don't have any evidence of them meeting in their corporate offices in New York. But they're all Masons and they can meet in their Masonic Lodge
Mm-hmm.
or on golf courses
Mm-hmm.
made by someone who serves them.
Hmm.
But that's another story.
So Austrian Gesellschaft, in which International General Electric had 16 2/3 direct interest, also had two directors on the AEG board, Paul Mamroth and Heinrich Ferrels. Austrian contributed 40,000 Reichsmarks directly to the Hitler Fund. The Otto Wolff concern, Thyssen Steel Company, AG represent of substantial New York loans in the 1920s. had three directors on the AEG board: Otto Wolff, Henry Nathan, Jacob Goldschmidt. Alfred Krupp Jan Bohlen, sole owner of the corrupt organization, an early supporter of Hitler, was a member of the Aufsichtsrat of AEG. Robert Ferdinand, a member of Himmler's circle of friends, was also a director of AEG.
So we're getting close here.
Mm-hmm.
Himmler's.
Mm-hmm. In other words, almost all the German directors of German General Electric were financial supporters of Hitler, associated not only with AEG, but with other companies financing Hitler. Walter Rathenau became the director of AEG in 1899. By the early 20th century, was a director of more than 100 corporations. Rathenau was also author of the Rathenau Plan, which bears a remarkable resemblance to the Swope Plan, i.e., the FDR's New Deal, but written by Swope of General Electric. And it quotes, "In other words, we have the extraordinary coincidence that the authors of the New Deal hike plans in the US and Germany were also prime backers of their implementers, Hitler in Germany and Roosevelt in the United States."
And so what you've heard in your history books that Roosevelt was a communist and that the New Deal was communism is really just a cover. It's not. It's National Socialism. But I think from what the facts that Sutton just presented, the J.P. Morgan Bank should be labeled as a Nazi bank,
Mm-hmm.
and that they should be investigated for war crimes, and they should be made to pay for war crimes, and not just the killing of Jews, the killing of Christians in Germany and in and outside of Germany. Because when you give that much money to make a party come into power, you're responsible for all the blood that comes out
Mm-hmm.
at the end. So remember that when next you see J.P. Morgan's name, Nazi bank.
Swope was chairman of the board of General Electric Company, an international General Electric. In 1932, the American directors of AEG were promptly connected with American banking and political circles as follows: Gerard Swope, chairman of International General Electric and president of General Electric Company, director of National City Bank and other companies, director of AEG Austria and Germany, author of FDR's New Deal, and member of numerous Roosevelt organizations. Owen D. Young, chairman of board of General Electric and deputy chairman, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, author, but J.P. Morgan of the Young Plan was superseded the Dawes Plan in 1923 or 1921. Clark H. Miner, president and director of International General Electric, director of British Thomson Houston, Compagnia Generale dell'Elettrica, Italy, and Japan Electric Bond and Share Company, Japan.
I'm going for world domination here. Japan too,
Mm-hmm.
and Italy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those Germany, Japan, and Italy. They're all the Axis powers of the Second World War.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, if since brother Alexis is joining us from Italy, we can thank General Electric.
Well, we might be. My dad always used to say, "Yeah, when you buy an appliance, buy a General Electric because they're good quality appliances and they last a long time." But uh, most people didn't know what General Electric was involved in, and I can see why they would have spent lots of money and exercised a lot of political pressure to make sure that this didn't end up in a history book in your high school American history class.
Uh-huh.
Um, and this is why getting Sutton's books and using them in homeschool programs is essential to free your children and the next generation of Americans from political manipulation by the Democrat and Republican parties because they're completely Masonic. and they're completely evil. They have a nice little face. Vote for me, make America great again, but they're really about murdering hundreds of millions of people for their own profit, their own
Mm.
godless
Oh, it goes
profit.
on.
Does that finish Sutton's investigation on General Electric?
Not even close.
Okay. What's the next rotten chapter in GE's dirty little plans?
Um, well, we got to go through the technical cooperation with Krupp first because we got to get through that guy because it tells how they avoid being bombed in World War II.
Yeah, now most people don't know Krupp was one of the largest steel manufacturers in Germany, and they're also one of the largest producers of armaments. The Krupp guns, artillery guns, are one of the most notable parts of the German war machine. And Krupp manufactured en masse artillery barrels for tanks and artillery pieces. Without Krupp, Germany could not have waged a war on Europe. So if General Electric's involved in any way with Krupp, that's very significant. And so, what does Sutton uncover?
Quite apart from financial assistance to Hitler, General Electric has extended its assistance to cartel schemes with other Hitler backers for their mutual benefit and the benefit of the Nazi state. Cemented tungsten carbide is one example of this GE-Nazi cooperation. Prior to November 1928, American industries had several sources for both tungsten and carbide and tools and dies containing this hard metal composition. Among these sources were the Krupp Company of Eastern Germany and two American firms to which Krupp was then shipping and selling: the Union Wire Die Corporation and Thomas Prosser and Son. In 1928, Krupp obliged itself to grant licenses under the United States patents, which it owned to the First Sterling Steel Company and the Ludlum Steel Company. Before 1928, this tungsten carbide for use in tools and dies sold in the United States for about $50 a pound. The United States patents, which Krupp claimed to own, were assigned from Austrian Kommanditschaften and had been previously assigned by the Austrian Company of Germany to General Electric. However, General Electric had also developed its own patents, principally the Hoyt and Gilson patents, covering competing processes for cemented tungsten carbide. General Electric believed that it could utilize these patents independently without infringing on or competing with Krupp patents. But instead of using the GE patents independently in the competition with Krupp or testing out its rights under the patent laws, General Electric worked out a cartel agreement with Krupp to pool the patents of both parties and to give General Electric a monopoly control of tungsten carbide in the United States. The first step in this cartel arrangement was taken by Corbiol Company Incorporated, a General Electric subsidiary incorporated for the purpose of exploiting tungsten carbide. The 1920s price of $50 a pound was raised by Corbiol to $458 a pound. Obviously, no firm could sell any great amounts of tungsten carbide in this price range, but the price would maximize profits for GE. And in 1934, General Electric and Corbiol were also able to obtain by purchase the license granted by Krupp to the Ludlum Steel Company, thereby eliminating one competitor. In 1936, Krupp was induced to refrain from further imports into the United States. Part of the price paid for elimination from the American market of tungsten carbide manufactured abroad was a reciprocal undertaking that General Electric and Corbiol would not export from the U.S. Thus, these American companies tied their own hands by contract, or permitted Krupp to tie their hands and denied foreign markets to American industry. Corblet Company then acquired the businesses of Thomas Prosser and Son, and in 1937 for nearly $1 million. Corblet acquired the competing business of the Union Wire D Corporation by refusing to sell. Krupp cooperated with General Electric and Corblet to persuade Union Wire Die Corporation to sell out. Wow.
This is like gangsters. But you notice they're making all these agreements right before the war breaks out. It's almost as if they know the war is going to break out.
Mm-hmm. Here comes Chrysler. Licenses to manufacture tungsten carbide were then refused. A request for license by Crucible Steel Company was refused in 1936. A request by Chrysler Corporation for license was refused in 1938. A license by the Triplet Electrical Instrument Company was refused on April 25, 1940. A license was also refused to the General Cable Company. The Ford Motor Company for several years expressed strong opposition to the high price policy, followed by the Coberloy Company, and at one point made a request for the right to manufacture for its own use. This was refused. As a result of these tactics, General Electric and its subsidiary Coberloy merged in 1936 or 1937 with virtually a complete monopoly of tungsten carbide in the United States. In brief, General Electric, with the cooperation of another Hitler supporter, Krupp, jointly obtained for GE a monopoly in the U.S. for tungsten carbide. So when World War II began, General Electric had a monopoly at an established price of $450 a pound, almost 10 times more than the 1928 price, and the use in the U.S. had been correspondingly restricted.
Now you can just imagine if a war would break out, like a world war, GE would be making lots of money. But if a world war didn't break out, well, they wouldn't make that much. They'd still make a lot, but not that much. So it's almost like they engineered this monopoly to profit from a war that they were planning, or at least they knew it was coming.
Mhm.
And this is what we said in our previous program. It was quite disturbing to see the bank, Brown Brothers Harriman Bank, invest in Tyson in such a way that they actually knew the war was being planned as early as 32, 34. And so this is how absolutely malign and depraved these banks are, that they would plan 8, 10 years in advance a world war, and in such a way that they make the most profit out of it. You're talking about completely depraved individuals that should be locked up.
Mhm. AEG avoids the bombs in World War II.
Isn't that lucky? Or is that luck?
No. By 1939, the German electrical industry had become closely affiliated with two U.S. firms, International General Electric on Broadway Street in New York City, the International Telephone and Telegraph, the largest firms in German electrical production, and their affiliations listed in order of importance were Heavy Current Industries, General Electric AEG, percent of German 1939 production, 40%. U.S. affiliated firm, International General Electric. Siemens Schuckert AG, 40%. Any affiliated U.S. firm? No. Brown Boveri at C, 17%. None U.S. affiliated firms. The telephone and telegraph, Siemens Halsic, 60%. Any U.S. firms affiliation? None. Lawrence AG, 85%. ITT. On radio now. Telefunken AEG after 1941, 60%. International General Electric. Lawrence, 35%. ITT, U.S. firm. Wire and Cable, Felton and Gilliam AG, 20%. ITT, Siemens, 20%. Any U.S. Affiliation? None. AEG? 20%. International General Electric?
That shows a lot of cooperation
Mm-hmm.
just from General Electric. So
Yep. So, in other words, 1939, the German electrical equipment industry was concentrated into a few major corporations, linked in an international cartel and by stock ownership to two major U.S. corporations. This industrial complex was never a prime target for bombing in World War II. The AEG and ITT plants were hit only incidentally in area raids, and then but rarely. The electrical equipment plants bombed as targets were not those affiliated with U.S. firms. It was Brown Boveri at Mannheim and Simonstadt in Berlin, which were not connected with the U.S., who were bombed. As a result, German production of electrical war equipment rose steadily throughout World War II, peaking as late as 1944. According to the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey's report, in the opinion of Speer's assistants and plant officials, the war effort in Germany was never hindered in any important manner by any shortage of electrical equipment.
So even in the conduct of war, the bankers were controlling where the bombs were going. Talk
Mm-hmm,
about the level. I mean, kind of level control you'd have. They'd have to control the president. Then they'd have to tell the Department of Defense, and they'd have to name their factories and their investments.
mm-hmm,
And that seems incredible that during war they would have that kind of influence, and that no one asked a question on why don't you want those factories bombed?
mm-hmm.
And
So the bombings that we know about were only non-U.S. corporations.
it's economic warfare. You're supposed to be bombing factories in the war effort. So
Mm-hmm,
that means you were, if you wanted to avoid being bombed by American bombers in the Second World War, you had to go to one of these factories and stay inside. Going to a bomb shelter wouldn't have helped.
mm-hmm.
Boy, if people found that out, I think they would look at the Second World War in an entirely different light. And to think so many of our GIs died in the Second World War,
Yeah,
thinking they were fighting the enemy, would have been a lot cheaper to invade Manhattan.
yeah. One example of the non-bombing policy for German General Electric was the AEG plant at 185 Mugenhofer Strasse, Nuremberg. The study of this plant's output in World War II is of interest because it illustrates the extent to which purely peacetime production was converted to war work. The pre-war plant manufactured household equipment such as hot plates, electrical ranges, electrical irons, toasters, industrial baking ovens, radiators, water heaters, kitchen ovens, industrial heaters. In 1939, 1940, and 1941, most of Nuremberg plant's production facilities were used for manufacture of peacetime products. In 1942, the plant's production was shifted to manufacture of war equipment, metal parts for communication equipment, munitions such as bombs, mines were made. Other war production consisted of parts for searchlights, amplifiers. The following tabulations very strikingly shows the conversion to war work. 1939, total sales in 1,000 Reichmarks. So we have 1939, 12,469 Reichmarks. 4% for war, 5%. Percent of ordinary production, 95%. 1940, 11,000 Reichmarks. 15% for war, and 85% for ordinary production. 1941, 21,000 Reichmarks. 40% for war, 60% for ordinary production. 1942, 20,000 rank marks, 61% for war, and 39% for ordinary production. Now, 1943, 31,000 Reich marks, 67% for war, 33% for ordinary production. 1944, 31 Reich marks, 69% for war, and 31% for ordinary production.
Complete conversion. So not only was General Electric buying up German industry, supporting the rise of Adolf Hitler, but their factories were involved in the war effort against Americans, against the Allies.
Yeah. So the actual physical damage by bombing to this plant was insignificant. No serious damage occurred until the raids of February 20th and 21st, 1945, near the end of the war. Then protection had been fairly well developed. Raids during which bombs struck in the plant area and the trifling damage done are listed as follows. So March 8, 1943, bomb striking plant, 30 stick type IB, damage done, trifling, but 3 storehouses outside the main plant destroyed. September 9, 1944, none, blast damage, trifling, glass and blackout curtain damage. November 26, 1944, 14,000 pound HE in open space and plant grounds. Wood shop destroyed, water main broken. February 20th, 1945, 2 heavy explosive bombs dropped. 3 buildings damaged. February 21st, 1945, 5 heavy explosive bombs dropped. Many IBs, many pounds. Let's see here. Also 3 buildings damaged. Administration building destroyed. Enameling works damaged by the high explosives.
Oh, it's so convenient at the end of the war to blow up the administration building where all the records would be kept about financing from New York.
Yeah.
Isn't that so convenient? So when you hear that it said that America didn't have precision bombing in the Second World War, now you know how precise it was.
Mm-hmm. Another example of the German General Electric plant not bombed is the AEG plant at Kuppersdorf, producing radar sets and bomber antenna. Other AEG plants which were not bombed in the war equipment production were, see here, Work Reitmandorf's Mit, Kreis and location, Kreis Southfield, product measuring equipments. Work Marx Stogast, Bayreuth, and product starters. Work F-18HA, Sachsen's shortwave sending sets. Work Reichenbach, Vogtland, dry cell batteries. Work Burgenland Field, Schachen SC Kimmins, heavy starters. Work Nuremberg, Ringdorf, Nuremberg, small components. Work Zindorf, Nuremberg, heavy starters. Work Magenhofen, Oberdahl, 1 kW cinders 250. 250 meters in long wave for torpedo boats and U-boats. Underwork Neustadt Coburg, radar equipment. So that the AEG plants in Germany were not bombed in World War II was confirmed by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, authored by such academics such as John K. Galbraith and such as Wall Streeter as George W. Ball and Paul H. Nitz, Their German electrical equipment industry report dated January 1947 concludes, the industry has never been attacked as a basic target system, but a few plants, i.e. Braun, Gover at Mannheim, Bosch in Stuttgart, and Steinstadt in Berlin, have been subjected to precision raids, and many others were hit in area raids.
So the competition was bombed, so that even after the war, they'd have even more of a monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if this is the only purpose of war, so that New York bankers could have even more monopoly.
Mm-hmm. He closes this chapter. At the end of World War II, an Allied investigation team known as Fiat was sent to examine bomb damage to German electrical industry plants. The team for the electrical industry consisted of Alexander GPE Sanders of International Telephone and Telegraph of New York, Whitworth Ferguson of Ferguson Electric Company, New York, and Eric J. Boardman of Westinghouse Electric. All the stated objectives of these teams was to examine the effects on Allied bombing of German targets. The objective of this particular team was to get the German electrical equipment industry back into production as soon as possible. Whitworth Ferguson wrote a report dated March 31st, 1945, on the AEG Ostland work and concluded, this plant is immediately available for production of fine metal parts and assemblies. To conclude, we find that both Rathenau of AEG and Swope of General Electric in the US had similar ideas of putting the state to work for their own corporate ends. General Electric was prominent in financing Hitler. It profited handsomely from war production, yet it managed to evade bombing in World War II. Obviously, the story of briefly surveyed here deserves a much more thorough and official investigation.
It's really devastating revelations about General Electric.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, it's interesting to know that General Electric, after this book by Sutton was published, was solely gotten rid of. They sold off one part of it, then another part of it, and then another part of it. And I think the appliance division has been sold to someone else. And so now it doesn't really exist as a company before. But if you get rid of a company, then you can't be sued for its crimes
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't exist in law. So they really know how to scrub it. But it's the key families behind it. It's Brown Brothers Harriman, it's J.P. Morgan, it's Citibank. Those are the real culprits. It's the banks, not the companies that they invested in or used as their tools.
Yeah, and and tomorrow I want to introduce you to another book by Sutton. Um, it touches on how the military built all the equipment used by the Soviet Union.
This seems even more unbelievable, but Sutton has all the information to show it that the Soviet military buildup was also had American industrial backing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very interesting thing, and one of these things you won't hear in any other news outlet because we are not controlled media. We are not controlled by the Masonic Lodge, and we are not controlled by any organization which is controlled by the Masonic Lodge, whether in the church or in the state or in industry. And that's why um, we are more than delighted to bring you the news of Sutton so that you understand what's really going on in the United States and Europe and around the world.
Yep.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on this program, and I look forward to tomorrow's program. If you appreciate the programs we do here at Order Militaris Radio, if you appreciate a kind of apostolate that really tells you the truth without any control or strings, please go to the bottom of the page of this program, Order Militaris Radio TV, and press one of the button, press the support button, and decide of making a one-time offering like a subscription or a monthly repeating offering. It all goes back to the equipment for this apostolate so it can begin you more and better programming in the future and pay our bills for the bills we do have for internet access and to make these programs, the programs that we use to make these programs.
Yep.
And I thank you for watching. And please do share this program with others so they understand um, what really happened in the 20th century.
Mm. This is Zota Militarist Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Vult.